For those of you who are joining potentially from LinkedIn, my name is Bill Fanning. I help run the Talk organization with Norm, and we're really excited you're here. For those of you who may be joining for the first time, Talk is a community, talent acquisition leaders and professionals, really focused on having exchanges and dialogues like this in a virtual or real-time setting, and allowing us to collectively grow through our network, through our understanding of key challenges, and how to better address them, whether it be process, technology, training, better policy, whatever that may be. So really excited you're here, and we'll continue to get rolling. So I have three quick asks. Let me just jump to the next slide real quick. For those of you here, if you could turn your camera on, that would be awesome. Part of having a discussion, I think, is being able to see each other, and it makes it a lot more engaging. If you can't for any reason, I totally get it, but I always like to ask. The other thing I wanted to ask is if you, as we go through this, please remember this is not an asynchronous push of data. This is a discussion, and absolutely would love you as we go through this to jump in, share your thoughts, ask your questions, challenge whatever we're saying. Would really enjoy it. And the third thing is just to have some fun, right? This is a good time to learn a little bit, but also to enjoy ourselves and talk. And the only thing that I also have seen people do that I wanted to encourage, this is also a great networking event or a way to expand your network. So if that's something you're open to, drop your LinkedIn profile in chat. And if you're looking to expand your network with other TA leaders, take a look at chat, and there might be some people you could add to your network. So a couple updates. Talk 2.0 is under development. I'm making progress there. Fundamentally, what I'm on is a data load, and you leave an ex-infantry officer alone with data, and it's going to take 2 weeks for him to figure it out. Good news is I can now spell data, which is a good start going forward. I'm working on our podcast. I was moving a little bit faster than maybe I should have, so I apologize for that, but I'm putting some of the production pieces in place, so I'll have an update going out around that soon. And a couple discussions that we have, I just wanted to keep on the radar. Agentic AI with Felix is today. Super excited about it. Next week, I have Trent Cotton coming to join us, and we're going to be talking about becoming a talent engineer. And I don't want to give too much away about it, but talent engineering is something that Trent and I have been talking about as kind of the evolution of something that's coming as part of the responsibility of a TA leader, fundamentally engineering the candidate journey using agentic AI. And what are the skill sets and what does that role look like? So if that's interesting to you, I hope you can join us. And then on May 29th, we're going to be talking about contingent workforce. So as we read a lot of the industry stuff that's coming out, contingent workers are forecasted to be somewhere between 50 to 60% or more of our workforce. Norm, you probably know the number better than I, by 2030. And managing that is a very different and unique process. So we're going to have some folks come talk about that. I'm going to skip my quick asks. If you're new to Talk, you're coming in from LinkedIn, I would love for you to join us. And it's free. It's a great community, and it's really here just to help us find the ways to grow our network and grow our abilities as TA leaders. So you can scan that QR code or just come to our website. But Talk is a great resource, and we'd really love to, if you're not, really love for you to become part of the community. Final thing I wanted to mention is Talent Sphere is coming up. It's June 3rd through 5th. And this is a TA retreat that we're hosting at the Scott in Scottsdale. They promised that it's going to be a cool, balmy 120-degree. No, I'm kidding. It's Scottsdale in June. Could be a little warm, but the conversations will be equally as engaging and fun. The retreat style experience, it's what I call an unconference. And the really cool thing about it is tickets are now free. If you'd like to come and you're in the area, or if it sounds of something that's interesting to you, please join us. The code TALKFREE is just, you need to enter as a promo code, and then you're welcome to come, and there's no cost for the ticket itself. And would love for you to be there. I think it's going to be a great event. We have some phenomenal people coming to share insights and speakers. The really cool thing about it is that it's focused on network growth, learning something, and being able to come home from the conference with something you can use the next day. We have a lot of industry leaders speaking, no vendors, and is really meant to be a powerful exchange. So if you're interested in coming, it's free to do so. If you have any questions, reach out, let me know, and we can go from there. All right, time to move into our next topic, which is Agentic AI. And I always laugh because in talking with my kids, my older sons, they always talk about Skynet is coming in because they're big Terminator fans. So I had to throw this in there. But I invited Felix to come with us and as part of this discussion, because I think he's got a phenomenal background, and what he allows us to do is really talk about this from another perspective, which is somebody who's actually designing and putting these things together. So it's a good cross section of what we want to be able to be thinking about, which is we're practitioners. How are products being designed? Are we exchanging data the right? What does the future look like? And I think it's really fortunate to have Felix here. I've been connected and known Felix for a long time, and he's always been a great resource for the industry and a great source of understanding. So I'm super happy he's here, and I'm really excited to get going. So Felix, I thought maybe for the first thing, it might be great for you to just take a minute and introduce yourself, and then we can get underway.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the invite. You should also know that Bill and I, the first time we met was actually in Italy, at breakfast in a hotel. Okay, that sounded kind of a little bit dubious, but it wasn't dubious. It was a part of trying to find a way to working together. So I'm Felix. I'm the VP. I'm a VP for product management at Cielo. And I'm specifically over the last 2.5 years, we're focused on how to build AI, implement and build AI products, and we can roll out to over our 300 clients over the last 200 years, which we have globally for our internal teams, for external teams. And before that, I guess is that I've been around for a long time in the HR tech industry. I was one of the first employees of the first UK generic job board in '99. So I've seen a lot of things with job boards, with with machine learning, what works and what doesn't work. But I tell you one thing, I've never seen anything like a generative AI. It's something that is absolutely phenomenal, and it's going to take everything by storm, but in a good way, right? And maybe I should also say I've come through a little bit of a transition, because maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have said, let's just replace all recruiters with AI and all talent acquisition people. But since then, working with a lot of the Cielo's client operation teams, what I actually found out or surprising to me is how important the human expertise actually is. Might not be surprising for anybody else, but for me, it was a little bit surprising. And then I've started to realize that actually the beauty of generative AI is not that we can replace everybody and make already broken processes even worse, but that we can reimagine recruitment and reimagine talent acquisition and can amplify what humans do, right? And kind of really kind of bring together the human expertise with the AI intelligence. And if we manage to do this, then actually I think talent acquisition is in a really great state. Yeah. And so that's in a way what I'm mainly focusing on at the moment, is like, how can we bring people and AI together, not AI replacing people, and at the same time, AI will also not go anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and this was really an interesting, wonderful experience from my time at Unleash. I have perceived maybe over the last 18 months, as I've talked to people, what I call an AI fear wall, which is preventing, I think, some people from really letting their thinking explore what AI is and can do, and that humanistic aspect of it, because there's a certain level of fear, which is, I think, driven a little bit from a lack of understanding. It definitely was for me. I could definitely think of and see myself viewing AI as a replacement rather than an enhancement. And that's not and I share your point of view, Felix, that that's not what it is, but maybe because there's technically 2 or 3 generations of AI that we're dealing with, right? There was the machine learning and matching aspect. Then what I think is 2.0, which is like Chat GPT, things of that nature. I'm not I may be a little too broad in my categorizations, but then what I think of as AI, the next generation coming from that is the agentic aspect of it. Maybe we could take a minute and just talk about what is agentic AI and how does it differ from maybe the AI that we're getting exposed to on a daily basis through some of the online tools we might be using.
Well, yes, certainly. We can look at all of those different things. The first thing that, I will talk about, the first thing that I want to talk about is like, we need to be really careful. And doesn't happen just with AI, but it was the same with social media. It was the same with GDPR. It was the same with every time a new technology comes out, right? You have a lot of people in the recruitment technology landscape at the moment is a carnival of false promises. Right? We have the new vendors, they come in and they promise all of these miracle cures, and they're just digital snake oil salespeople. Right? Because you can't tell me that that A is a positive, that we kind of replace all of the humans. B, when I hear people talk about agentic and that they have agentic, I'm very questioning. There's not many people or many software that agentic actually has. And the second thing is also with existing HR tech vendors. I think I'm a little bit more how should I say, a little bit more concerned about what they're currently putting out there, because they're just sprinkling out the AI terminology about fundamentally flawed systems. And we had it a little bit, if you remember, back when social media came and people said they put like a share button on their websites, and suddenly they were social media, right? They needed social media. And it's a little bit when they now say, oh, we have a little bit of, we've linked something to ChatGPT and there's a little box there, or you can go to ChatGPT. That isn't an AI system that uses AI, but I think we need to go a little bit further and deeper what that actually means. And the third thing that we have, and I guess, Bill, you were at Unleash, I wasn't there, but I can imagine that we have a lot of consultants currently walking around talking about that they can help about AI, and ultimately they make a lot of money just by sowing confusion and sowing fear about how difficult it is. And the majority of people, AI is so new, and there's only a few people that I know in this industry who have actually built enough AI systems and have rolled it out to clients that they actually know what AI is capable of and what AI isn't capable of. Yes, everybody has played with ChatGPT, but playing with ChatGPT doesn't mean that you can roll it out to an enterprise client. You haven't dealt with the compliance, you haven't dealt with the ISO things, you haven't dealt with all of those different items that you need to do, and also the replicability. So a lot of times, and I'm coming now to this, a lot of times what you see is actually automation. And we all know automation, right? So it's a workflow, and A happens, and then you go to B, and you go to C, and you're being kind of pinged. And then you have generative AI, and generative AI, and I think it's a beauty about generative AI that you think you're talking to a human, but generative AI, all that it can do is forecast, or in a way predict what the next word is going to be. So it's very difficult, and they obviously trained large language models. You all know about those kind of things. And then, so this is the generative AI. Then you have agents, and agents are ultimately prompts. And a prompt is that when you type into ChatGPT, an agent is when you put the prompt, and it can, and you can kind of, in a way, you don't have to rewrite the prompt over and over again. You just have a button, you put something in. That is an agent. Now, an agent can have inputs of data, it can have outputs, what it brings out, and it can use tools like web search and so on. But that is all that is an agent is. Now, what we see often now is like agent workflow. So you have one agent, and that agent, when this agent is done, you have a second agent, you have a third agent, you have a fourth agent, and you kind of go, it's no different to an automation workflow, right? And this is when automation and AI comes together, one after the other. Now, often I would also say, before you have agentic, which is when you have like a supervisor agent, and the supervisor agent decides which other agent it needs to fulfill a task. And they just choose this agent, and they just kind of instruct the agents to do those tasks. No different to a human. If I would, for example, say, I need to recruit people in Brazil, the first thing that I need somebody who speaks Portuguese. Second thing, I need to have somebody who has a deep knowledge about where to advertise. Third thing, if they're data scientists, I might need somebody who has data scientist knowledge, and, right? And this is like when that's ultimately, it's like task, it's like micro tasks ultimately that they do, that you would do in a team as well. Now, as I said, with generative AI and large language models, it's often very difficult, as you know, when you have typed something into ChatGPT and then you type the same prompt into ChatGPT again, you might get a different answer, or most likely. Right? Because it's like talking to a human when you get a slightly different answer. Now imagine that in a recruitment consideration, when every single time you get a different answer. So do you really want to have an agentic AI, or do you want to have also an AI workflow that automatically jumps from one to the other, or do you need to have always a human at some stage that looks into this and says, is the outcome correct? That is not only from I think what I would advise currently, you need to be comfortable with what the AI output is. You need to and there's obviously ways around it. How can one AI can check the other AI about hallucination, stuff like this, but there's also some legal considerations because some of the EU AI Act, but also some of the legislation in the US requires us in talent acquisition that there's a human needs to make the decision. And we obviously don't want to sue if the AI says something that might not be absolutely fine.
Yeah. No, I think that's
a long journey around here.
It is. And I think you made a really interesting point around the generative AI giving us different answers and coming from the large language model. I mean, it's interesting for me. I'm curious for all of us here. What are the AI tools like we're probably all using it for a lot of different things, but in the recruiting flow, what are some of the AI tools we're using today? And curious, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, how much babysitting do you have to do for that tool? So I'm using X, or maybe using, for example, simple ChatGPT to write job descriptions. And that requires, I think, a lot of babysitting because you have to go through and validate that it's an accurate document versus there may be somebody using an AI tool for interview scheduling. And that actually may have a little more of an autonomous flow because it can look at multiple calendars and make some simpler decisions. But what are we using?
I'll start. My name's Meredith. We are implementing HiredScore to help us with resume review. Now, we are not live yet, so I really can't speak to how much babysitting has to be done because we're just in the implementation phases. For our phone screens, we use the AI notes feature in Microsoft Teams. So we record our phone screens, get the notes, and then there's a little bit of review of that language and what notes it took and adding maybe a few things that the recruiter wanted to capture. So I'd say it's pretty minimal, but there is still a little bit of review and babysitting of it. And we did get a consent. We worked with our legal department to get a consent question that we ask ahead of the meeting being recorded. Did you want us to talk or did you just want us to put it in chat?
No, I definitely, absolutely. Okay. I was very excited. So I'm listening to you talk, but Amanda just made a really interesting comment. So I was trying to watch the comments too, but no, and it's interesting that you brought up HiredScore because it's obviously a vendor we're here. Question for you, Meredith. You don't have to share the other vendors you look at, but why did you choose them?
I was not actually part of the negotiation process. I think it all looped together because it was a timing thing, honestly, Bill. We were renewing our Workday contract and HiredScore was just recently bought by Workday. So
Yeah.
it was almost like a bundled package, buy now and save and bundle, right? Like, so I don't know that we didn't do like a substantive RFP and pursue a lot of vendors. We had demos from other vendors, but because it was part of the part of Workday platform now, part of our contract renewal, it just got lumped together. So does that help?
Absolutely. One of my very first HR sales jobs was, and this will date myself, was PeopleSoft. And the Dave Duffield ERP sales model is in still full effect, because that's exactly what we used to do, and it sounds like they still do. But that's great, awesome.
Maybe can I just, Meredith? I think the interesting thing about HiredScore, which I think is a good platform, is a great platform, right? Is when we're talking about AI, they're using much more machine learning than anything. Because if you're looking at if you're matching resumes to job description, that's ultimately what you want to use, because it gives you more. It's more repeatable. Generative AI can help, but I wouldn't yet build an entire matching system just on generative AI. So I think it's a right choice. And this is again when we need to say, like, what do they use under the hood?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for saying that, because in the implementation phase, you all know you go through that buyer's remorse, like, oh man, did we do the right thing? So I really appreciate you saying it's a good platform that helps to keep the energy going for us.
Yeah, there is.
Meredith, sorry, go ahead, Bill. Just wanted to ask a question about the price score. So when you implemented that, Meredith, in your company, did you train the platform in your own data, and how it was the experience?
We just kicked off on March 10th, so we have not implemented yet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're still in that. We haven't even tested the system yet, so we're still very much in the pain of the implementation process. Is where we're at. Yeah. So I really appreciate Felix's comment that it's a good platform.
That's good to hear.
Meredith, the one thing that I would say, and it's just a comment that you made, we talk a lot about bias in AI. One of the key concerns with bias, obviously, if it's only trained on internal data. So I would just ask them, right? Because we all know about this Amazon example. And that came because the AI did what the AI was supposed to do. It looked internally, and internally they had more white, middle-aged developers that were top performers. Therefore, the AI suggests that. So it's kind of like, the beauty about large language models is that it's trained on so much more of this data. So you should have. So I normally think bias is a red herring. It's not something that we need to be too concerned about. But it's just something I would question and see how that is. I'm sure they have that completely in hand.
We're actually discussing that today because we're getting questions from our privacy teams. And yes, we just got a response from them that it is aggregated by all of their customers and it's anonymized, if I pronounced that word correctly. So yes, it's not just our own internal data. Very much appreciate that. That was timely. And I appreciate what you said about being a red herring, because we are very much chasing that around right now. So thank you.
I think especially in talent acquisition, I think with bias, it's, does AI, we always ask, so does AI should have no bias? I always think compare it to humans. Do recruiters have no bias? Do your hiring managers have no bias? And I think AI has less bias than any of them. Mm-hmm. Therefore, isn't that actually a positive to where we should go? And on top of it, it also helps go beyond the inclusive, we often just look at race and gender, whereby AI can actually go much deeper in identifying, special groups.
Yeah. No, I think AI has a really ability to have a rich taxonomy behind skills and backgrounds and be able to break that down much better. So I think it's a phenomenal point, Felix. I like the way you said that.
I think one thing, there's also, Nina, you kind of had a question about candidate consensus on being recorded, listened to during interviews with AI. I think it would be interesting if anybody has some data there. We've done it, and we also use voice AI, so like a voice recruiter calling them. Candidates are absolutely fine because they rate convenience over, privacy, as we all do.
I just think it's interesting. I mean, I'm currently in the healthcare space, and as far as a general consensus, we're on the reserve side of opening ourselves up to that because, if a candidate isn't interested in being exposed, I mean, there's so many dangers that we've talked about when it comes to AI, to have your voice recorded in an interview, just general privacy. I would hate to lose out on a great candidate in a phone screen stage because they don't want their voice recorded in an AI. So I'm just curious for those who have experimented or are dabbling, but given our organization and our industry, we're late to adopt.
So what we do is we offer different avenues because who are we to tell the candidate what they should do, right? If they want to talk with a AI because they can talk with it now, or if they want to talk with a recruiter, but they might need to wait until the recruiter has a time free, or if they want to apply, or if they want to be called back, who are we to tell them what to do? So I think you need to give them different, different routes of adventure and let them choose their own adventure and saying, where do you want to go? What we're seeing at the moment is that candidates actually choose the voice AI.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So more specifically, I was speaking to Meredith's, adoption of using the recording in the interview process to capture the notes. So the stage I'm specifically referring to is, once the candidate has been vetted, the resume has been vetted, and they're moving through the process, using AI to listen in on the conversation to capture the notes from the interview. And kind of summarizing that. So that way the recruiter can be more of an active listener versus, a transcriber. Because I see the pros and cons, I don't like to type throughout the course of an interview, but I also, I'm very mindful of people's feelings towards being recorded by AI. So I'm just curious to know, like, if Meredith or anyone else has run into any candidates being reserved about wanting to be recorded and if that's impacted the interview process for them.
We've been at Smartsheet piloting Bright Hire with integration to Greenhouse and Google Calendar. And we've only been doing it for, I want to say like 4 weeks. And we've only had one candidate opt out so far. And it was an accident, they said. So, our goal is to really just make the candidate feel as comfortable as possible. And so if they choose not to opt in to being recorded, that's okay. We'll take notes. We'll go back to the traditional way of interviewing. But again, my sample size is really small. So I'm sure we're going to get more. And if anybody else is using a tool like that or similar, I'd love to hear kind of what your experience has been as well.
Yeah. Jerry had one really good question, and it kind of relates to this. What would you do with it if the recruiter asks for a copy if the candidate is asking for the copy of the transcription from the interview themselves? Is that something you'll provide back to them? Or I thought that was an interesting question because it is recorded, and I think that's a fair request from somebody going through the process.
Just wanted to comment that quickly, Bill. So I guess depending on which state you are, I know states has different laws. California, you are required under privacy law. And what we do, at least in our policy, is we refer them to our standard process, to which they can email and they request for the copy. And anyone, at least in California, they can request any information that there are in our system. But again, depending on which state, if you're allowed to do that.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I think that's really interesting. So we're talking about the technologies we're using. And Felix, maybe this is a great area for you. I think we talked about generative AI, and I think a lot of what we're seeing is the use of that. I'm curious, where are we seeing some early adoption of agentic AI and ways that that's being used? Because I agree with you. One of the things I noticed walking around Unleash, and I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but there's a very wide perspective of opinion and approach to AI. The only thing that, to summarize it, that I saw as a commonality at the trade show was the word AI on the booth. Past that, everyone has a different thought, a different approach, but it's, And I would say 99% of the people had a really interesting perspective, but there was a wide spectrum of how people are approaching it. And for me, it felt like 95% of it was generative, supportive, and it was not agentic, meaning taking a task and completing it. And so I'm curious, Felix, what are your thoughts there? When we think about early adoption of agentic AI, where are we seeing that?
I think we see it in small pockets, right? And that's maybe not something that where there's a big use case. But for example, an agentic use case would be that the AI decides, do I need to go to the internet or not? Which tools it uses. So I think what I see it's more is like that you use, or we have agents where the agent decide which tools do they use. Do they scrape from a website? Do they go to a website? And these are kind of small use cases. Now we've built also a brand where you can build your entire EVP and recruitment agency, where we have a supervisor agent, which then chooses which agents, depending on the questions, which agents they should suggest to the user to use next, because there's 17 different agents in this EVP recruitment marketing play that we have. So but then it doesn't start say boop, and it doesn't trigger it automatically until the human or it doesn't trigger several of them. It triggers the first one, but then the human obviously needs to read through the response. Now, obviously, I know that we have with Adam Gordon, somebody else on this call who has built some cool agentic or generative AI stuff. Adam, what do you see? He can't find the unmute button because he's not used to using.
Well, he needs an agentic AI button presser.
Yeah, I mean the area. Thank you for asking the question, Felix. The area that I'm involved in is very much around the creation of assets and things like that. And what we've done doesn't do what you've just described in terms of going and like deciding what tools to use and things like that. It goes and retrieves information from a variety of sources and then makes semi-decisions around like is it white collar? Is it blue collar? Is it exec? Is it hard to fill? Is it easy to fill? What's the supply of the talent in that particular location? And then determines what are the tasks that are needed to take on this piece of recruitment, and therefore what are the assets that are needed, such as things like outreach messaging or Boolean strings or that type of thing. So that's what we've been doing. And I mean, there's very little. I agree with what you said earlier, Felix. There's a heck of a lot of things that are getting pulled into the market described as agentic AI, and it's nothing of the sort. It's like probably not even AI. It's just automation.
Yeah,
and there's been so many announcements from like well-established recruitment technology players that's really bogus.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that was that was I felt kind of guilty walking around Unleashed last week because I'd be standing at a booth going, how is that like I couldn't, and my first approach to that is I always challenge myself, is there something I'm missing? Am I not getting this? But after I stood there for a couple of minutes and had a discussion, I walked away going, okay, well, that's nice, but I don't feel that you're delivering agentic AI the way your marketing is proposing you are. So I think just to shift gears for a second, because I think it's an interesting question. And I apologize for using your initials, JK, but I didn't know your name. I think it's interesting because we're talking about the transition from generative to agentic AI. And Felix, you made the comparison of maybe transitioning a recruiting team to an agentic process. JK asked that a lot of the tools that we're using anchor in budget. And obviously, for any new tool, there needs to be a business case, an ROI, and a payback period that, I don't know, my experience has always been 18, 24 months max. So I'm curious, how are people navigating the budgetary process to bring these tools into their tech stack, which is still a little bit of an antiquated term, but I'm curious, how is that anything anyone has any Thoughts on?
While you're thinking, what do you think about saying we have a client who I can't name, massive manufacturing company. They laid off 1/3 of their recruiters in December. That's around 150 recruiters to kind of create the budget so that they can really invest into the agentic or to generative AI, because they're now building teams that are agents and recruiters. And I have a lot of respect for those guys, because it's not often that it's not very often that you have people who kind of so are convinced of their use case that they say, I actually take the responsibility and I make the changes on my head be it. I make those changes because I know what I can deliver, and I have a lot of respect. What I also see is where the other thing that we see a lot is that people, before any new person is signed off or even a replacement is signed off, or like if you lose one of your people and the new one signed off, that they need to show that they haven't used all the productivity that can be done by generative AI. These are the two things that I see. Sorry, didn't mean to butter your margin like that.
No. I think that's great feedback, and I think it's really interesting. I'm just curious, and I agree with it's an offset of FTE is awesome. Often the way people justify the ROI, but I'm curious: is there any other things that people have who have brought these technologies into their organizations? Any other examples of the budgetary constraints?
Well, I'll try and it's Neil Crompton here.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah. So when I was at Conagra Brands, we started our journey with AI. Like most people probably on the call, our first venture was towards piloting certain tools. And essentially that gave us the proof of concept. So we weren't looking to downsize the team, at least not immediately. But we could use the data that we gathered through certain tools, and I'm happy to go into the details on which ones, to actually drive the ROI in terms of whether it's increasing the number of qualified candidates that we're pulling into the process, whether it was decreasing time to fill, because whether we like it or not, that's still a key driver for business leaders.
Yep.
And so that's how we could then start wrapping around sort of the indirect cost savings that we're getting through the tools. So that was our route through the CHRO to great effect as well.
Awesome. No, and I think that's, the growth of AI has always kind of had it's a similar journey to when a lot of technologies came into go to market with revenue operations, right? And what we saw is, while we weren't looking to replace salespeople, we were getting better conversion ratios. We were increasing the volume of opportunities. We were learning and increasing efficiency, which drove the ROI of the technologies. And I think, Neil, you kind of hit on similarities that I think stand out.
Maybe so I'm coming from a product perspective, right? And from a product perspective, we always think, let's build a very small and very cheap, minimal viable product. Test it.
Yeah.
In Cielo, we normally test everything with our internal talent acquisition team. Everything we do, everything we build, and our internal talent acquisition team knows that this is not kind of a super stable platform and that we're using them as our guinea pigs. But they love it because they're right at the forefront. That gives us the first insights. Then once we've done this, then we choose like 3 client teams and we run it with 3 client teams. And then we decide, should we continue and ask for more investment, similar to like I guess like a startup would, or are we gonna stop it? Because a lot of things might not be done. And I think the beauty about generative AI, you can just go, not just, but you can relatively easily build an agent, with any of the platforms, be it Claude or Gemini, or whatever your organization uses, and then use some no-code, low-code to build a user interface, and then just test it with a couple of people. And it gives you your first base benchmark, ultimately, which you can then link to kind of maybe get a little bit more investment. And that's how we do it and that's how we've always done it with product. Test, and the KPI is speed to learning.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the vendors are creating that testing opportunity for a lot of potential customers to come in and try and see, because it's such a newer approach to doing things. I think that testing is important for ROI, but also just for conceptual understanding of, will it add value?
Yeah.
I think it's important. So here's it. So I think it leads me to the next question this is one I think that hopefully is not just my question, but when you think about this, like we've talked about what it is, how to use it, some of the products, but what do you see the impact being from your perspective when you look at a TA team, roles, structure, focus over the next, 2 to 3 years? How does agentic AI, not generative, but the agentic aspect that we're talking about, is it's on the verge of becoming a reality? How does that impact the way we do things from your perspective?
Well, I think as an industry, we're at a crossroad at the moment, right? We can either decide in saying we have broken processes and we're using generative AI to replace people and everything becomes more dehumanized, more industrialized, more process driven. And recruiters won't like it, hiring managers won't like it, candidates won't like it. Or we're reinventing it. And we're saying, actually, how can we reimagine recruitment? How can we amplify it? How can we generative AI? And that's where I live, right? In my world, or in my vision, my reality, I think agentic AI will help us enormously, right? We can make recruitment more human again. And I think it's in a way a little bit bizarre that our most advanced technology might make us more human again, but not less. And I think that's, as an industry, which we really need to focus on, how and reimagine, how can we make it more human? The future has an ancient heart. When you think about recruitment pre-job boards, pre-ATSs, when we industrialized everything and we couldn't deal with the kind of real relationships, all talent acquisition people had real good relationships that had a real deep market understanding. And I think it's about that again. It's about not, one funnel process driven just for just so because it's more convenient. It's going to be again more to the old way job boards and ATSs, where the recruiters or the talent acquisition experts will have relationships and build relationships and become proper advisors to candidates and to recruiters and to hiring managers, sorry. And I think that's what we will see, because at the moment, if you think what we are measuring and what we ask recruiters to do, we ask them to behave like robots. Make so many calls, make so many outreach, ding, dong, 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 right? Time to hire, how fast can you track people through? We don't think about quality of hire anymore. Who cares? As long as I fill my seats as fast as possible and as cheap as possible, that's all that counts. And I think we can really make a change there, but it needs all of us, right? To really have the courage in saying, let's reimagine this whole thing. Let's not take the broken processes that we have and put AI in, but how can it be better? So one of my things, for example, is I believe that everybody should be treated like an executive recruitment, right? Recruitment is ultimately two-tier system. You have the executive recruitment for the top or the C-suite for the few, and then you have the process-driven sausage machine for the rest of us. I think with AI, what we can see is like a real, everybody can be treated like as if they had an executive search experience, right? With the same consideration, with the same personalization. There's no more excuses. And we can see it because now generative AI, or in Cielo, we can see it, generative AI makes it now viable. Viable to do this. And we can see better conversion rates. We see faster, we see a 20% decrease in time to hire. We see candidates being happier. We're seeing hiring managers being happier because it's all becoming easier and more human, but still delivering great results.
Yeah. No, and I think Caleb and Neil both made a comment that kind of echoed what you were sharing, is that it will create the time for the recruiter to have that relationship. And I think that is definitely an aspect that is missing. And, when you look at the journey a candidate goes through, they apply for a job, they get an email that has a 4 out of 10 delivery rate right now. Then they may or may not have an easy process to schedule a phone interview. They get no feedback. It's an extremely broken transactional journey that they're going through that we've built over time. And quite frankly, I think a lot of the processes we were built were developed around limitations of technologies at one point in time. And that's why we do it that way without maybe stopping to think about it. And I love the concept of being able to not just take a process that we're doing today and inject AI in it, but actually stop and revisit the process itself and think about the journey from the ground up. And, if you go to a building analogy, we're building a house on a crumbling foundation. And it's time to rethink the foundation aspect and then build a much stronger process. Great question. And definitely something we can dig into a little bit from, and I'm going to call you S. Metzger, so I apologize. Maybe it was Susan, but we're naming you Susan now. So Susan asked a question, and it was, what processes should be automated through AI? And that's a great question because there's so many different ways and so many vendors approaching it that are telling you these are the processes you should automate. So I'm curious, as we think about it as a group, what are the processes we see the high value from automation?
I love it also that we talk about processes, right? Because in talent acquisition, we always talk about people, process, and technology, but all we talk about is technology, and all the vendors want to sell us is technology. But without the first, there's a reason why technology is the third, because you need to first know what are the roles that you want people to do. What do you want people to do? What process, or as Neil said, which workflow do you want them to follow? And then you choose your technology. It doesn't matter if we talk about AI or ATS or whatsoever, it's always the same thing. And I think we always forget this. And I've seen it too often where we sold stuff to tech to, and in previous to Cielo, sold tech to people and it completely didn't work. And you can see it before launch companies are ready. So we're now not selling our tech anymore to companies that are not prepared to kind of, in a way, do the difficult part, which I don't think is so difficult. But what we, for example, automated in at Cielo, the first thing is sourcing, because there's no reason anymore that any recruiter should go into LinkedIn or any database and do sourcing, or even needs to learn Boolean searching. All of this can be done much better and much faster by the candidate by AI. AI's machine learning stroke automation, not generative AI, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is outreach and personalized emails. That's the second thing that can be done by it. But then, so we've changed all of these kind of, so our sources don't source as in they don't do all of the searching in database anymore. They do the first outreach, but they then are there to have conversations with candidates as soon as the candidate wants to have a conversation. So we, in a way, pulled the human touch point further forward. We're not waiting until they've applied, because we know from our research, candidates want to speak with recruiters before they go into an ATS application process, because we all know, right? Workday, SAP, whoever you name it, it's 40 minutes. And a candidate behaves like I guess they have a life to live. They're busy. They want to know, do I have a chance of getting this job? The process that Bill said. So they want to say, do I have a chance of getting this job? I want to speak with somebody to see if I have a chance, because I much rather know right at the start I don't have a chance, because then I didn't waste 40 minutes of my time, because I might have 5 jobs that I think of applying to. Which one is the one that I want? So you need to speak with them before they apply, that they have it. That means your conversion rates and in your funnel, the numbers might change, but it will make a huge difference. And that's what I mean with it will become more human, but at different stages. And also one little thing is when candidates speak with recruiters, they don't see it as an interview. They see it as fact finding.
Yeah.
The hiring manager. So it's a kind of a slightly different thing. Anyway, that's just one part. You can have loads of different things, right? So there are certain things if you want to speak with a recruiter, but I would say you need to look at your own process. You need to look at your own industry. It really depends on which countries you recruit for. It depends on what roles you're recruiting for. So who are the candidates you're dealing with? Because for some that might not work, right? Some are not on LinkedIn or any sourcing databases, and you actually need to do, I don't know, billboard advertising, because that's the way of getting them. And then you have a different process and you have a different automation. So I'm sorry, Susan, that I'm a little bit vague and not saying this is the one thing to do, but it really depends.
Yeah, no, I think it's not it's a very different question for each hiring team because you're in different industries. You're hiring different people for different skill sets. You've got a different candidate journey. If you're a frontline retail hospitality, that candidate process is a much faster transactional model. And so an AI approach to that is very different than when you're hiring a technical developer or system engineer. And the human aspect of that, quite frankly, becomes a differentiator, especially with technical resources. They are definitely on a fact-finding mission. They are as concerned about you and your skill set as you are about them. And it's a very different approach. So how you think about that with some of the tools is really interesting. Yeah, and yes, LinkedIn is very close to a monopoly. I wholeheartedly agree on that front. Great, great analogy there. Final thought that I just wanted to throw out there to everyone. The other side of this fence, and it was brought up a little bit earlier, but I wanted to, is the AI enablement of candidates. And I'm curious, as we're going through our process, how do we think about the candidates' use of AI? And do we set parameters or do we discuss it? Because there are a horde of tools coming onto the market now to assist the interview, the skills assessment, a variety of ways that people are using them. And so, and I've heard a lot of schools thought, no, yes, hey, they're going to do it anyway as part of their job. So let's embrace it and make it part of the interview process. But I'm curious, as you guys think about that, what are some of the different ways that we think or approach candidate use of AI? And specifically, the aspect to me that's important is candidate fraud.
Well, first of all, this is not necessarily just down to AI.
Right.
Right? We saw candidate fraud for the last since recruitment existed.
Yes.
Different guises. It's the same thing when people say, "Oh, AI is now destroying education." Well, you can pay people like $100 and they write the dissertation for you.
Yeah.
All of this happen.
That was my part-time job in college. I wrote papers.
There you go. I think the interesting thing is like also if somebody says to you they have an AI that can see that which was written by AI, I don't believe it. Show me the AI that really can, show which one is written with AI. I think it's much better to be very clear about that you expect that they're using AI and at what stage do you expect it. And what we see, there was one comment about graduate recruitment. What we see with graduate recruiters, what comes, assessment centers become, in-person assessment centers become much more important again. So it helps at the beginning. They're using AI, so they kind of also find these big, they're mainly UK graduate recruiters that I know of. They also then find that candidates use them, but they also are very clear in saying don't use it for those kind of things because when you get to the assessment center, they will find you. You will find out.
Yeah, I absolutely, and I think that's a hard reality sometimes of the thorough process of the evaluation, making sure that a person walks in the door. I guess A is the person that you interviewed, because I've heard a bunch of stories around that, but more importantly, is walking in the door with the skill sets that they can deliver on what they've committed to do. So that's really important.
But I agree with Cal, right? You don't want to have people just auto-applying to everything.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because there's sitting in my role at Talk, there's a lot of organizations that want to come and talk about things. And one of them, that's exactly what it is. It's an automated tool for people to blast 500 resumes, 500 applies a day. And I'm like, I mean, the only piece I haven't said no. I've considered a lot. The only people I've said no to were Indeed and tools like this, where just because I want to keep us all in a happy, joyous hour discussion. So Indeed probably is not a good forefront for that. And want to make sure that we're bringing tech. But you're right. There's a lot of tools coming in where people are just cramming the market with applies. So that's really interesting to me. Well, guys, we got about 4 minutes left, and I really appreciate everyone's time and attention here. I wanted to end with a couple things. If this discussion was interesting in terms of what it is, next week's discussion is how do we build our journey with that, right? And if anybody doesn't know Trent Cotton, he's out on LinkedIn. He's a phenomenal thought leader, and he's a TA practitioner. He's not a vendor, but he's a phenomenal thought leader around this area. I highly enjoy his provocative perspectives on this. And if you all are interested, please come to it. The other thing is Felix is open to having a conversation around this. Again, I'm a huge fan of Cielo and what Felix is doing, but the reason I asked him to come here today was because of his background, his skill set, and his understanding of the market. But if you would like to continue this conversation or you have questions, you can book some time with Felix. He's graciously put his calendar link in chat, and please feel free to take advantage of it. He's an awesome resource, and I'm thoroughly excited that folks like Felix will come and spend their time with us, because I feel like we walk away with a better insight. And again, we can't solve everything in an hour, but it's great to have these conversations. And finally, just if there's anything like this that you find valuable or that you want us to build on, shoot me a chat and talk. I love to get feedback. I love constructive criticism. I love ideas on what areas we should think or focus on. And so if that's something that you would like to be part of, please shoot me a chat. I'd love you to be there. And I really appreciate everyone making time today. It's been a great discussion. Felix has done a great job. And if this is an area that you're looking at technology for, I would encourage you to add Cielo to the list of organizations you consider and evaluate, because the thoughts and the industry understanding that Felix brought to this call, he's bringing to their product. And from that perspective, I think it's a really cool opportunity to learn how vendors are putting these things into practical application. So thank you, everybody, very much for being here today. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion, and I'm really excited for next week. Felix, thank you again for making time and being here, and we will see you all soon. And if anyone, this will be up on our site shortly if there's anything you want to go back and revisit. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye.